The hour is 7 p.m. having arrived. I'll call to order this regular meeting of Keene City Council. This meeting is being broadcast live on the City of Keene YouTube channel. The video is also streamed on the city's website and is posted to the website, barring any technical difficulties, by the next business day. If you'd like to receive an electronic City Council packet to reference during future broadcasts, please contact the City Clerk's office and subscribe to the city's meetings email list. You can do that on the website as well. And the agenda is accessible from any mobile device. I'd ask the clerk to please call the roll.
Brian J. Lake.
Here.
Michael J. Remy.
Here.
Gladys Johnson.
Here. Michael
Giacomo.
Here.
Randy L. Filio.
Here.
Robert C. Williams.
Here.
Philip M. Jones.
Here.
Andrew M. Madison.
Here.
Chrissy Roberts.
Here.
Raleigh C. Omerod.
Here.
Bettina A. Chadbourne.
Here.
Catherine I. Workman.
Here.
Mitchell H. Greenwald.
Here.
Kate M. Bosley.
Here.
Thomas F. Powers.
Here.
Thank you. Councilor Madison, would you please lead us in the pledge?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
So I just have one announcement. Next week on 11/11 at 11 a.m., we will have a Veterans Day program at the rec center as usual, and we're trying to work out the further details for that, but it will happen. So 11/11 at 11 a.m. on Veterans Day at the rec center. And I'm looking for a motion on the minutes from Councilor Powers, a second by Councilor Bosley, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to accept the minutes from the October 20th, 2022 regular meeting as printed.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Bosley. Any discussion on the minutes? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. And we have a proclamation. I'd invite Duncan Watson and Brett Thelen up here to the front, please, if they're available. Right up here. So do you want to describe a little bit about this for us?
Yep. Hi, I'm Brett Thielen. I'm the science director with the Harris Center for Conservation Education. We're the group that's been working with the city on salamander brigades and amphibian road closures, or big night detours, as we call them. And we recently awarded the city of Keene an award for this work together. So if it's okay, we presented this award at our annual meeting on October 21st at the Harris Center. But we also wanted to bring it here since we've worked with so many of you on this project. And so I do have the remarks from that annual meeting, if that's okay to share here. And this award it's called the Lori Bryan Partnership Award, and I'll explain what that means as part of these remarks. So if you spend enough time shepherding salamanders and frogs across roads on rainy nights, as I do and many of our volunteers, seeing the impact that even just a few cars can have on nights when thousands of amphibians are afoot, you will eventually wonder, why can't we just close the road? But when it's your job to ensure safe traffic flow in a city of 25,000 people, the answer to that question isn't so clear-cut. So when one of our crossing brigade volunteers set up a meeting with Duncan Watson, the Assistant Public Works Director here at the city, in 2017 to discuss the idea of closing amphibian road crossing sites to vehicles on migration nights, I fully expected to be sent on my way. Instead, Duncan listened thoughtfully and said, "Let's see what we can do." That was the first of many conversations, not just with Duncan, but with the city engineer and other members of the Public Works Department, with the police department and the Parks Department, and ultimately the mayor and city council, who needed to give your approval for such road closures to proceed. 5 years later, and big night detours are an annual spring occurrence at North Lincoln Street here in Keene. This past spring, we expanded to a second site at Jordan Road, as you all know. You had to give your approval for that. That site's home to Jefferson salamanders, a species of conservation concern here in New Hampshire. Keene is the first and so far only community in the Granite State to close roads for the protection of migrating amphibians. I am confident you won't be the last. This project is a true partnership between the Harris Center and the City of Keene. The city provides their transportation planning expertise to design smooth, safe detours and the barricades and signs to make them happen. They also get the word out to their considerable network, sometimes with very little notice, when we tell them that a big night is imminent. For our part, the Harris Center uses our many years of community science data and time on the Salamander Beat to predict when amphibian migrations are most likely to occur. We work with interns and volunteers to put the barricades and signs in place and train and coordinate hundreds of Crossing Brigade volunteers every year in Keene and beyond to collect the amphibian migration data that ultimately helps inform these road closure decisions. We also welcome visitors to the North Lincoln Street site when that road is closed, orienting them, answering questions, and teaching them the big night basics. I know some of you have come out on those nights. Over the past 5 years, these detours have provided safe passage for thousands of amphibians and offered a safe place for hundreds of people to experience the magic of the spring amphibian migration, including elders, toddlers, and others who would never have felt safe coming out to see amphibians cross a road if that road were open to traffic. This project has become a source of pride for the people of Keene and for us at the Harris Center. And every year I hear from people in other places who've been inspired by Keene's actions and want to know how they can bring big night detours to their own towns. That's how I know that Keene is the first but won't be the last. We could not do this work without our partners at the city, and I hope I'm not overstepping when I say that I don't think they could do it without us either. So the Lori Bryan Partnership Award at the Harris Center was created to honor the care and thoughtfulness that our former executive director, Lori Bryan, brought to her work with the Harris Center's many community partners, and to recognize that we can accomplish more together than we ever could alone. So for saying, let's see, instead of no, for stepping with us into this uncharted territory and coming out the other side as leaders in grassroots wildlife conservation, for all the joyful rainy nights at North Lincoln Street over the past 5 years, and all the joyful rainy nights at North Lincoln and Jordan Road to come. It is my honor to present the Lori Bryan Partnership Award to the City of Keene. And I do have a copy of that award to give, so.
Great, thank you. And thank you, Duncan, for facilitating this partnership. Yeah, do you have anything you want to say, Duncan?
I would just add that if you've never been to one of the amphibian crossing nights, sometime in the springtime, starting in the March timeframe through most of April, when the temperatures hit about 50 degrees and it's a rainy night, plan on checking it out because it'll bring out your inner child out of you.
I can attest to that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks. All right, next we have a public hearing relating to the zoning ordinance change. You have something to read? Patty?
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held to consider ordinance O 2022-11 that has been submitted by a Randall Walter representing 310 Marlborough Street LLC. The ordinance proposes to amend Table 8.1 and Section 5.4.5 of Chapter 100, the Land Development Code of the City Code of Ordinances, to permit recreational entertainment facility - indoor as a principal permitted use in the business growth and reuse zoning district. Per order of the mayor and councilors, City of Keene, 6th day of October, 2022.
All right, thank you, and I recognize our Community Development Director, Jesse Rounds.
Good evening, Mayor. Jesse Rounds, Community Development Director. Just want to give a little bit of background. This was originally introduced August 18th before the council. The public workshop before the joint committee was held on September 12th. And at that meeting, the planning board recommended, or the planning board voted that the ordinance change was consistent with the comprehensive plan, and the PLD committee voted to forward it to a public hearing. Public comment was positive, and the staff supported the change. So I'm happy to answer any questions with that information.
Any questions from the council? Seeing none, does the petitioner have anything that they'd like to say before we open up the public hearing? I just want to give you that opportunity. It's not necessary. Okay. All right. All right, so thank you very much, Jesse. With that, I'll open up the public hearing. Are there any members of the public that wish to speak to this? I just ask that you step up to the microphone and state your name and address for the minute taker. All right. Seeing none, I'll close the public hearing except for written public comments, which will be accepted until 1 p.m. next Tuesday, November 8th. Written comments must be signed and submitted to the city clerk's office by that date and time in order to be included in the record. And we have a second public hearing. I'd ask the clerk to please read the notice.
Notice is hereby given that a public hearing will be held to consider ordinance O 2022-09B, which has been submitted by the City of Keene Community Development Department. The ordinance proposes to amend several sections of Chapter 100, the Land Development Code, to include change the display uses that are permitted within the Conservation Residential Development Subdivision Regulations in Table 8-1 and the permitted uses sections of the rural, low-density, and low-density 1 districts in Article 3. Modify the density factor and minimum lot size for the rural district within the CRD regulations to 2 acres per unit and 32,000 square feet respectively. Add density incentive options to the CRD regulations, including an open space density incentive, a solar incentive, and a workforce housing incentive. Modify the permitted uses within the CRD regulations for the rural district and the low-density 1 district to include multifamily dwellings with limitations. Remove the requirement to submit a yield analysis plan, and add additional submittal and filing requirements for CRD applications in Article 25. For order of the Mayor and Council of the City of Keene, this 20th day of October, 2022.
All right, thank you. And before we get started, I do just want to remind everybody that these proposed changes and this recommendation does not include the 5-acre to 2-acre change that was discussed before. That is not in the recommendation. So if that was going to come forward, it would come through another separate public process. But with that, I would recognize our senior planner, Mary Brunner.
Thank you. Good evening. Mary Brenner, Senior Planner. And so I'm here before you tonight to give an overview of this ordinance, O-2022-09B. And as the mayor just stated, this ordinance was revised at the public workshop phase to remove the lot size change in the rural district. So that's why it's now a B version. So before I jump in, just a quick, I think I do have a presentation tonight. I don't know if that can be shown on the screen. But while we're waiting, I can just go through really quickly where we are tonight. So this ordinance was first introduced to City Council for a first reading on July 21st. And it went to the Joint Planning Board and Planning Licenses and Development Committee for its first public workshop on August 8th. At that joint committee meeting, there were some minor changes made to the wording, so the ordinance moved forward as an A version for a public hearing with the recommendation from the Planning Board that it was consistent with the master plan. City Council held the first public hearing on this A version of the ordinance on September 1st. It was referred to the Planning Licenses and Development Committee, and because there was a lot of public feedback at that first public hearing with concerns that were raised about the ordinance, City Council decided at your September 15th meeting to send it back to committee with a recommendation to remove the change to the minimum lot size. And the Joint Committee held their second public workshop on October 17th, so just last month. And at the public workshop, the committee decided to take out the minimum lot size change from 5 to 2 acres, creating a B version, and then recommended that the ordinance as amended was consistent with the master plan, and the PLD committee recommended that the mayor set a public hearing, which brings us to tonight. Today, with the B version of the ordinance, it mostly just deals with changes to the CRD subdivision regulations. And so I thought it might be helpful before I get into describing what a CRD subdivision is, to first give a really high-level overview of what a subdivision is in general. So the definition from the state RSA is on the screen, but in a nutshell, a subdivision is when the owner of a property wants to divide their land into additional lots. So you have your starting tract of land, sometimes referred to as a parent parcel, and you go through the subdivision review process. If it's approved, you end up with new lots. So you create new boundary lines separating it into 2 or more lots. So that is what a subdivision is. But there's some important things to note about a subdivision. The first one is that the only person or entity that has the authority to subdivide the land is the owner of the land. So the owner can initiate a subdivision application, or an applicant with written permission from the owner, and that's it. So the city cannot subdivide someone else's land. It can only be done by the owner of the land. They have to give their permission. In addition, in order to do a subdivision, you have to have your land surveyed by a licensed surveyor, someone who's licensed in the state of New Hampshire, who must survey where all of the lot lines, existing lot lines are, and where the proposed new lot lines will be. In addition, if there's any surface waters on your land in Keene, you have to have a wetland scientist delineate the boundaries of those surface waters and the location of the surface water protection buffer, which in the rural district is 75 feet from the surface water. Then the applicant can't just get their subdivision approved without going through a process. They have to go through a public hearing process before the planning board. And the planning board, in their review, they have to find that their subdivision criteria have been met. I'm not going to go through all of those criteria. They're up there on the screen. But the planning board is looking at things like, does the lot conform with the underlying zoning regulations? So the minimum lot size, frontage, setbacks, things like that. Does it have frontage on a class 5 road or better? Is there reasonable access? Is the lot buildable? So those are the types of standards that the planning board looks at for all subdivisions. In addition, there are other local regulations that may apply depending on the site. So for example, there's some planning board site development standards, just in particular the drainage and stormwater management. If there's concerns around drainage, the planning board can require a drainage report. For traffic and access management, if there's going to be 10 or more new dwelling units, the applicant has to do a traffic study. If there's any surface waters present on the site that would be impacted by the subdivision, they would have to get a conditional use permit through the subdivision or the surface water protection ordinance, and so on and so forth. I have a list up here on the screen. This doesn't include permits that might be required from the state. So I thought that might be some helpful background. So now going into a CRD subdivision. A CRD subdivision is a type of subdivision where the starting tract of land, basically you have to put 50% of the starting tract of land into open space that's going to be permanently reserved as open space in perpetuity. And then the developer can cluster the dwelling units on the remaining portion of the tract of land. So I think a picture says 1,000 words. So this slide has a figure that kind of compares. On the top is what you might call a conventional subdivision, and on the bottom is a conservation subdivision. The conventional subdivision sort of utilizes the majority of the site for house lots, leaving fragmented pockets of open space, and most of the land is transformed into lawn and yard areas. Whereas on the bottom, the conservation subdivision clusters the house lots and retains a large contiguous area of open space. The overall amount of impervious area is reduced. The open space area is now contiguous, and the stream is now protected by a riparian buffer. The open space could be used for things like passive recreation, so this graphic shows a trail. But in both scenarios, the overall number of dwelling units is the same. If you count up those little black houses on the figure, you'll get 19 in both the top and the bottom image. Therefore, CRDs are considered to be density neutral overall, unless they can include a density incentive. So when I'm talking about CRDs, and I mentioned the tract, I'm talking about the starting parcel of land or the parent parcel. The lots are the new parcels of land that are created through the subdivision. The open space is land that has to be permanently reserved as open space, and it must include all primary conservation areas that have been identified on the land. And that's done by a professional surveyor or a wetland scientist. And then those primary conservation areas include all wetlands and surface waters, slopes that are greater than a 25% grade, floodways, and springs. So this map shows this is the zoning map for the city of Keene. So it shows all of the different zoning districts. CRDs are only allowed in 3 zoning districts: the rural district, which is shown in the light yellow, and it's denoted by the R; the low density district, which is in the bright yellow, denoted by LD; and the low density 1, which is a darker yellow color. I think there's only maybe 4 LD1 parcels in Keene at the moment. So those are the 3 zoning districts where conservation residential development is allowed. And then this map shows all of the parcels that meet the minimum tract size requirements for a CRD. So this is basically everything shown in green and orange on this slide is land that meets the minimum tract size to do a CRD. So I just thought that might be helpful context. So within the CRD regulations, there are dimensional requirements that are specific to CRDs, which are displayed in this table up on the screen. This table is split into 2 sections. The top section is specific to the tract of land, the starting parent parcel. So you'll see here that the starting tract of land has to be a minimum of 10 acres if you're in the rural district in order to do a CRD, or a minimum of 5 acres in the low density or the low density 1 district. There's a minimum amount of frontage that's required for that starting tract of land. And then you also have to have setbacks around the outer edge of that tract boundary, so both from the external roads and from other tract boundaries, in order to create a buffer from the surrounding zoning district. And then the bottom portion of this table includes dimensional standards for each of the individual lots that are proposed to be created as part of the CRD subdivision. So again, things like the minimum lot area, all the different setbacks, coverage, building coverage, impervious coverage, and things like that. The CRD regulations also include uses that are actually different from the underlying zoning district. And actually, sorry, this slide talks about how the overall number of units is calculated. So the total number of units within a CRD are calculated by using something called a density factor. And to do this, you take the starting area, so the tract area, and you divide it by the density factor, and you get your number of units. So the example that's up on the screen is if you have a 7-acre lot in the low density district, you divide it by the density factor of 10,000 square feet, and you get 30 units that would be allowed. And you'll see it's the same for a CRD or for a conventional subdivision. It's the same number of units, but again, with the CRD, those units are going to be clustered closer together, and the remainder of the lot will be conserved as open space. And so the density factors that are shown on the screen are the density factors that exist today. And you might note that within the rural district, the density factor is actually a little bit of a density bonus compared to the underlying zoning district already, because it's 1 unit for every 4 acres if it's just a regular CRD subdivision, or it's 1 unit for every 3 acres if you put at least 60% of the land into open space. The low density and low density 1 are equal with the underlying zoning district. And then within the CRD regulations, they include permitted uses that are specific to CRDs and provide for more flexibility in housing type. So within each of these underlying zoning districts, you can only do a single family home. Within the CRD, you can do a single family home or a duplex in all three of these districts. And then in low density, you could do a multifamily home with up to 6 units. And again, this is intended to provide for more efficient use of the land and to reduce the amount of impervious coverage and reduce the fragmentation of open space. So this ordinance, getting into the actual proposal, this ordinance is proposing to add 3 different density incentive options to the CRD regulations. This would allow a developer to add additional units into the development in return for providing some sort of public benefit. So the first one that's proposed is to provide additional open space. So under this scenario, first of all, the starting tract of land has to be at least 10 acres in size, so you can't do it on anything less than 10 acres. And then the developer would have to put at least 65% of the tract into open space. That's up from 50%. And then in return, the developer would get a density bonus of 10% or 1 unit, whichever is greater. The second option, we're calling a solar-friendly subdivision option. In this option, the developer would have to meet a list of solar-friendly criteria. I'm not going to go through each of them individually tonight, but I can if you would like me to. And then in return for meeting that solar-friendly criteria, the developer would get a bonus of either 10% or 1 unit, whichever is greater. And then the third one is for workforce housing. Under this density incentive option, a developer would have to meet workforce housing criteria. Essentially, 20% of the units that are part of the development would have to be considered workforce, and I'll go over what workforce is in a moment. In return, the developer would get a density bonus of 20% or 1 unit, whichever is greater. And as an additional incentive, the developer would be allowed to build triplexes, which are 3-unit homes. I will note that the maximum height and the maximum number of stories is not proposed to change, so the maximum height or number of stories is still going to be 2 stories. So when I say triplex, it's most likely going to be like single, kind of like a townhome style development. Overall, the maximum density would be capped at 30%. And then I mentioned workforce, so just to define what that means, the goal of the workforce housing incentive is to encourage new developments that provide workforce housing, and workforce is defined as for-sale housing that is affordable to a household of 4 earning up to 80% of the HUD area median income, or rental housing that is affordable to a household of 3 earning up to 60% of AMI. So those exact numbers will change year to year depending on what the HUD area median income is. But the numbers for this year are up on the screen in that green table. Right now, the affordable to a workforce family sale price is $233,500, and that's assuming that a family has an income of $71,280. And by the way, that's considered middle class. So when we're talking about workforce housing, we're talking about middle class people who are working in jobs such as police officers, nurses, that sort of thing. These are people who, this is not subsidized housing. This is considered workforce. And then with the rental one, that would be $1,200, and that's including both rent and utilities. And that assumes an annual income for a family of 3, that's $48,110. And then lastly, I just wanted to call your attention to a couple sections of the master plan. So I included a couple of excerpts specifically from the housing chapter up on the screen that talk about the need for a balance of housing and creating new housing opportunities across all incomes and lifestyles. In particular, under the affordability section of the housing chapter, it states that the community and cities should support creative means to expand affordable workforce housing. For example, changes in land use regulations can assist in creating a market for developers to build this type of housing through the provision of density bonuses or other incentives. So what we're proposing tonight with the workforce housing density incentive was specifically called out in our master plan as something that the city should do. So that part of this, I believe, is very consistent with the master plan. The housing chapter also talks about providing a balanced and diverse housing stack. We also have a climate change chapter that talks about saying that the city and community should actively pursue the integration of renewable, large-scale and small-scale energy sources, such as wind, solar, and geothermal, into the community's energy mix. We have a chapter on open space and greenway connections that talks about the importance of open space. I'm just going to read a quick statement from that. Restoration of important conservation values and functions is important to the community, especially as it relates to wetlands and surface waters and to the flood mitigation these resources provide. Conservation areas around important wetland and surface water areas allow the natural system space to work, such as when wetlands are flooded after heavy rains or when a stream naturally shifts its location slightly over time. So there are, I think, the density incentives that are proposed as part of this ordinance are directly supported in the master plan. There are a couple things I didn't go over were some glitches and that we're proposing to fix with this. The biggest one is making sure that the uses that are allowed within the CRD regulations are also reflected in the zoning ordinance, so that it's clear if somebody is looking at what uses are allowed in their district, they'll see that duplexes and, if you approve this ordinance tonight, triplexes are allowed in their district through a CRD subdivision. That I'll take questions.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary.
Yep.
Are there burning questions? Yes, Councilor Greenwald?
$1,200 for the rental, including all utilities, is that for how many bedroom unit?
I believe in order to be considered workforce under the state definition, it has to include at least 2 bedrooms, but our definition doesn't include a requirement for the number of bedrooms. However, what it does say is that any units that are considered to be workforce within the development have to be of the same approximate size, quality, character as the other units in the development. So if it's a development that includes mostly 4-bedroom houses, the workforce units will have to be similar.
Low end, 1,200 for 2-bedroom with all utilities. Very difficult.
Any other questions from the council? All right. Thank you, Mary. So seeing now, we'll open up the public portion of the hearing. If anyone would like to speak to this item, please step up to one of the microphones and state your name and address for the minute taker, please. Anyone? Yes.
This one? That
Either one.
Okay. Good evening. You should have received a handout with a map. And I'll be referring to this as I speak. It's a CRD existing. Mayor Hansel, city councilors, my name is Thomas Lacey, 241 Daniels Hill Road. And I'm here to give my view on the proposed changes in the CRD subdivision. I thought it would be helpful to actually look at an existing CRD, which you have before you. There are actually 2 CRDs presently in town that I'm aware of. One is the one we're looking at, which is on Lower Daniels Hill Road, and then there's one off Darling Road on Darling Court. So this CRD is on Lower Daniels Hill Road. The total property acreage is 27 acres. There are 17 acres of dedicated open space, which is around the top here. One residence has frontage on Wickham's Mills Road and is a 3.4 acre lot. There is a short street with a cul-de-sac called Schuyler Way. As you can see, there are 5 lots branching off of the cul-de-sac. The average size of the lots off of the cul-de-sac is 1.25 acres. Each lot has its own well and septic system. Each drilled well has a statutory protective radius of 75 feet, which you can see it's the circular. You can see I've got blue dots. If you look closely, you'll see them. The well radius is depicted by the circle. The area reserved for the septic system is depicted by the rectangle with the test bits insignia. And they are, they're rectangles. You'll see them. The house footprint can encroach somewhat on the well protective area. As you can see from this layout, that a house, driveway, well, and septic system pretty much fill up a 1.25 acre parcel. This is a CRD as it currently actually exists in the rural zone. The well radius, by the way, it's not only for your lot, you have also, when you lay these out, you have to pay attention to neighbors' septic systems too. This CRD is an example of how the CRD concept, how it presently exists. It allows for the opportunity for higher housing density than would ordinarily be possible because of serious topographic limitations. Even though with a traditional 5-acre zoning, this 27-acre piece of property would potentially have 5 lots, in a practical sense, it would not be possible because of the topography. In fact, you could probably only get 2 or 3. However, applying the existing CRD density formula, 1 lot for each 4 acres, the allowable number of lots becomes 6. This CRD is a good example of how existing CRD parameters already allow for very concentrated building in the rural zone and achieve the goal of preserving valuable open space. Note that the cul-de-sac, it's the use of a cul-de-sac. It prevents a lot of road building, and you still actually can have a number of lots. So that's why it's used here. The new changes proposed for CRD subdivisions will allow a minimum lot size of 32,000 square feet or 0.74 acres. One can see from the existing CRD that it was a challenge to get the well, septic system, driveway, and house on 1 1/4 acres. Yet the new minimum acreage will be reduced to a 1/2 acre or 40% below what you're looking at right here. Conditions would have to be perfect to allow for such a subdivision. Conditions that are typically found on agricultural land or prime forest land, areas that the master plan and state growth guidelines say should be given careful consideration. It is evident from the wholesale reduction in the density factor by 50% and pushing the viability envelope and reducing the already tight lot size, the rural CRD will be redefined as a vehicle for enabling very, very concentrated development in the rural zone with a corresponding reduction in conserved open space. In other words, it's an exercise. It's becoming an exercise. How many sardines can you fit into a can? That's what it's becoming. There are no sideboards. These, as you was shown, these could be proposed anywhere in the rural zone under the guise of being conservation oriented. Appendix C of the Keene Master Plan lists the 8 state smart growth principles. Number 5 reads, preserve New Hampshire's working landscape by sustaining farm and forest land and other rural resource lands to maintain contiguous tracts of open land and minimize land use conflicts. Thus far, we are doing that. I'm against this CRD proposal. It is completely contrary to the theme of our master plan and will place land which should be protected in jeopardy. Thank you for listening.
Thank you, Mr. Lacey. Anyone else wish to speak to this? Yes.
Good evening. My name is Eloise Clark, and I live at 1185 Roxbury Road in Keene. This evening, I'd like to focus my remarks on the City of Keene Comprehensive Master Plan approved September 13th, 2010. I would like to compare how these zoning changes compare with the goals espoused in the plan. For those not familiar with this process, according to Michael Welsh, chair of the Comprehensive Master Plan Steering Committee, it was a 2-year process involving input from approximately 2,000 citizens. I was one of them. I may not have attended all the visioning conversations or the Keene voice sessions, but I did attend some of them, as well as responded to a survey. Paragraph 2 in his letter from the chair on page Roman numeral V, Mr. Welsh said this, quote, "You will notice when you read the plan that it frames an adaptive response to climate change and a proactive approach to sustainability. These were recurring themes from the public in the sessions that contributed to this master plan. However, these are not issues that the city is only now beginning to plan for. When you read this master plan, you will see that it affirms and expands upon Keene's existing plans. The new plan likewise affirms the city's long-standing preference for concentrating development within the areas bounded by the 9, 10, 12 bypass and Route 101 to create a walkable community. The new plan also supports an established Keene goal, one with an official history stretching back to the 19th century, of creating and protecting green spaces, trails, parks, and natural wildlife corridors," unquote. And also in the conclusion to the master plan on page 135, it has kind of a capstone quote in the first paragraph, and it states, "Keene is a unique community that residents are proud to call home. Although the convenience and attractions of a large metropolitan area are close at hand, the community maintains a solidly residential working class character complemented by a landscape of rural areas, farms, and open space. The heart of the community is its historic and vibrant downtown core. At an age when many communities are losing their sense of place, Keene has a firm sense of its identity, built on a foundation of the past and a clear vision of the future." The last appendix of the comprehensive master plan has an NRI, or Natural Resource Inventory, completed in 2009 when I was chair of the Conservation Commission. This NRI is a series of maps on pages 308 to 324. They show a variety of natural features such as agricultural soils, wetlands, aquifers, wildlife corridors, unfragmented blocks of land, and steep slopes. I would urge city councilors to review these maps before your crucial final vote at your next meeting. Pay particular attention to the map of steep slopes. Red coloring delineates slopes greater than 25%, while yellow shading shows slopes of 15 to 25%. You will see that most of the rural district of Keene is colored red or yellow. To continue this exercise, I will draw your attention to the Hillside Protection Overlay District, or Hillside Ordinance 0-2020-10-B. While the original ordinance was adopted in 2010, City Council approved modifications in 2020. Section 12.1, Design Use Standards, has 3 sections relevant to your decision-making. 12.3.1, generally, quote, "Development, including clearing, grading, and construction on all land areas in the Hillside Protection Overlay District shall be designed, sited, and carried out in a manner that does not cause undue adverse impact to the physical environment and shall provide for the retention of native soil, stabilization of slopes, and prevention of erosion or sedimentation of streams and watercourses," unquote. This is a worthy goal, but let's see how this plays out as the ordinance explains. Section 12.3.2, Prohibitive Slope Standards, lists what shall not be permitted in slopes greater than 25%, but then allows several exceptions such as driveways and utility lines. Section 12.3.3, Precautionary Slope Standards, are slopes between 15 and 25%. For comparison, Chesterfield Hill has rated at a 9% grade. The precautionary area allows for the, quote, "removal of vegetation, grading of slopes, erection of buildings, addition of impermeable surfaces, installment of sewage disposal systems, and/or removal of native soil," unquote, on up to 20,000 square feet. However, the developer landowner can apply for a conditional use permit, or CUP or CUP, to the planning board if they want to exceed the limit of 20,000 square feet. Exceptions are also allowed are the construction of driveways, city streets, or a private road. These are the areas I'm most concerned about. Despite the best efforts of the Hillside Protection Overlay District, significant development can still occur on areas of precautionary slopes. Remember, these are 15 to 25%. For comparison, Chesterfield Hill is a 9% grade. There are many acres of these in the rural district. I urge you to please study this map in the NRI appendix of the master plan. What happens if a CRD is proposed in a precautionary slope area? Will more than 20,000 square feet of land be cleared and graded and become impervious surface? Will runoff and siltation really be contained? Will this lead to increased flooding on the valley floor? How will wastewater be treated? Will demands grow for costly infrastructure projects to extend water and sewer pipes to the rural zone? There are some really practical reasons why the rural district has been minimally developed through the years, and these are some of them. I return to the heart of the comprehensive master plan, the quote from Mr. Welsh. The new plan, quote, "The new plan likewise affirms the city's longstanding preference for concentrating development within the areas bounded by the 9, 10, 12 bypass and Route 101 to create a walkable community. Have all avenues of development within the bypass and low-density districts been thoroughly studied to address the housing issue? Does pushing development into the rural district, quote, frame an adaptive response to climate change and a proactive approach to sustainability? Please contemplate that question before your next vote." And finally, from Mr. Welsh, the new plan also supports an established Keene goal, one with an official history stretching back to the 19th century of creating and protecting green spaces, trails, parks, and natural wildlife corridors. Yes, let's do that. Let's not focus on our development efforts in this beautiful rural district. Thank you very much for your time and consideration of this issue.
Thank you, Ms. Clark. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
First of all, I'd like to thank Bill Dow for, maybe when we meet in Patty's office, I can hear tonight, which I couldn't in the past.
Yeah, we finally worked out some.
It's wonderful. I mean, if you can't hear, you can't ask questions. Know what's going on. Thank you. I am Walter Lacey, live at 230 Daniels Hill Road, and I'll read my statement. The proposed changes to the CRD regulations, in my view, are unacceptable in the rural zone. They may be appropriate in the low-density and low-density 1 districts, however, where there are no changes to the density factor per dwelling unit or open space requirements. The existing CRD requirements for the rural zone reflect practical solutions for development in areas that are problematic for house siting. The use of 4 acres per dwelling with a 50% open space minimum and 3 acres per dwelling with 60% reflect the opportunity to site houses more creatively while still acknowledging the 5 acre per dwelling requirement of the rural zone and its low density status. Adopting a 2 acre density factor effectively destroys the original intent and positive goals of the CRD as a development tool in the rural zone. A CRD was recently done up near us on Daniels Hill Road, Schuyler Way, where 6 houses have been built on 27 acres of land for a density ratio of 4.5 acres per house. My brother spoke about this already. It seems to be appropriate use of the land. One curious aspect of the proposed changes are the solar density incentives. It would seem to me that more land area would be desirable to maximize solar benefits, not less. The homeowner should be in control of his or her natural environment, not dependent on the neighbor's tree cutting for unrestricted insulation. The workforce housing incentives, however well intended, deviate from the master plan and practicality. The master plan says housing, and I'm quoting, must be conveniently located, safe, and affordable, end quote. The rural zone is a wonderful place to live, but it's not conveniently located. And there aren't any sidewalks. It further states areas suitable for future housing growth include downtown and certain surrounding neighborhoods. No mention of the rural zone. The proposed minimum lot size is 32,000 square feet, or the size of the city parking lot behind St. James Church next to Lindy's Diner. The protection area of a well is about 18,000 square feet, which is a bit more than the footprint of the common on Central Square next to us. A septic system requires 4,000 square feet. I think you get the picture. Where do you put the house, garage, and driveway? And this is the rural zone, mind you. Constructing and maintaining a well and septic system add to the expense of rural living. The small size of the lot may even make maintenance of these necessities difficult if large equipment is needed. It would seem to be a given that city water and sewer would be critical to the affordability of workforce housing. Access to public transportation would seem to be a given as well. The proposed changes to CRD regulations in the rural zone would change an already flexible program for development in the rural zone to one that is destructive of the qualities it was designed to honor and promote. What perverse irony to have a program that was designed to protect the rural zone destroy it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lacy. Yes, sir. Just name and address for the minute taker.
Yes. Derek Scalia, 16 Hillside Ave in Keene. First, I'd like to thank all the people that were involved in the creation of this ordinance, and I come tonight to support this ordinance. I come as a community member, as a person of faith, and as a member of MIP. I mention this because I believe that our housing crisis is an issue about our values here in Keene and a commitment to creativity and nimbleness. And I'd like to give voice to the countless stories of those who are struggling because of the housing crisis here in the city and in this county, and understanding that it takes creativity and diversification in order to address the needs of individuals. I want to be clear that I recognize that this issue pertaining to housing is deeply complex and that there is no one regulation, ordinance, or legislation that will solve this problem. And I don't think that that's what's at the fact of the matter of this ordination. What it's trying to do is to address a specific need, and recognizing that that need comes in multiple places throughout the city. They have done this, and you have done this, with the parts of the city which are closer to the center, and now looking at what other options are before us to enhance this city to be attractive to all people and to ensure that this is a place that people call home. I do believe that through creativity and multiple initiatives, it will serve us well to address this deep need in our community. And part of that solution is diversity, a diversity of options. This includes locations throughout the city, including the rural district. For too many years, we have seen a housing market that has interfered with mobility. People at all levels are left with few or no options. I've seen this at the most dire of situation of people who are unhoused, but I've heard it in countless stories from individuals and organizations and businesses that are trying to attract people to this area and they can't find housing. These are our nurses, our teachers, our civil servants who are perfectly capable of driving to locations in and throughout the city, but they need a place to stay. They need a place to call home. People are struggling, and as neighbors, we have a responsibility to hear their cries and address their needs. We may never fully address the issue contributing to the housing crisis, but I implore you to never let that stop you from trying to address the needs of people. Sometimes we get consumed by the vast complexity of issues that are before us and neglect our responsibility to serve one another. I'm grateful for you being called to serve this community. I'm grateful for your intentionality to address the needs of those who are struggling by proposing creative solutions and diversification to address this issue. I hope you will support this ordinance and lean into the good work of serving your neighbors. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scalia. Yes?
Good evening. My name is Angela Pape, and I'm sharing a statement from Monadnock Interfaith Project, or MIP. First of all, we want to thank the city for their efforts to expand housing in our community. We are really appreciative that city staff are forward-thinking and are putting forth common sense improvements to the zoning code. So we support this ordinance. MIP believes that our community will be the strongest and we will all benefit if each person in our community has safe and secure housing. Our community does not have that now. Our city recognizes this need. We have a robust shelter system, and we're looking at crisis solutions, such as allowing families with no homes to sleep in their cars in designated areas, and to allow people to camp in our parks at the discretion of our park officials. Like, we're really in a crisis mode if we're having to have conversations such as this. So these crisis solutions are needed, and these efforts must continue, but they do not come close to solving the problem that creates this crisis, which is there are not enough safe, secure, and affordable places for people to call home. Too many of our community members struggle with a misalignment. Many people work, and what you get in your income and what the housing costs are out of line. Rental rates and starter home ownership are unaffordable for people who make $12 an hour, $15 an hour, $18 an hour. And these people are essential for our community. They take care of our elderly family members. They take care of our children in daycare centers. They're at, if we go into healthcare institutions, they're working in the hospital, in our grocery stores, our restaurants we like to go to. We likely can agree that housing insecurity is a root cause of so many other problems. And we likely can agree that all people need a place to call home so that they can move forward in their own lives and help support their families to have healthy and thriving lives. I've also seen very much within MIP that when people have stable housing, they're able to contribute to the community and to volunteer and to be involved in their children's school and other parts of their lives. MIP understands that many actions are needed, each contributing a piece to the solution to provide homes to our community members. The amendments to Ordinance O 2022-09B are some of these pieces contributing to housing availability. So we support this ordinance, land development code amendments, and support the intent of the proposed changes to the CRD ordinance to promote community goals related to open space preservation, renewable energy, and providing a balanced and diverse housing stock. MIP believes all the ordinance proposed amendments are important, and we have a particular interest in supporting the following changes. Add 3 density incentive options to the CRD regulations, including the open space density incentive, the solar incentive, and the workforce housing incentive. Second, modify the permitted uses within the CRD regulations for the rural district and low density 1 district to include multifamily dwelling with limitations. The number of dwelling units per structure shall be limited to 3, and this use shall be permitted in conjunction with a workforce housing density incentive application. These have potential to provide more opportunities for developing affordable and workforce housing for our community. This has potential to open up existing housing for people on lower income levels as well. So please continue your efforts to meet the housing needs of everybody across the income spectrum. Through these proposals, which we're really excited to see, and other city staff efforts, Elizabeth Dragon has done a lot of great things trying to help people in our city, and I really commend her for her leadership. There's real evidence that people are taking a wholehearted approach to this housing crisis, and we need to be doing lots of different things in lots of different areas. It's not one solution, it's going to take multiple strategies, and so we really encourage you to support this and to support other strategies that help us expand our housing options. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pape. Anyone else? Yes?
I'm Laura, and I live on Center Street in Keene. So I was recently at one of these meetings, and we were discussing this, and someone mentioned the city's master plan and referenced a comment. So when I got home, I went and I looked it up, and I spent about 5 hours perusing this document, because this is it's an amazing document, and it inspired me. And when I read it, it felt like the place that I wanted to live, and it felt like the place that I could see Keene becoming. And a lot of what it talks about is one of the first things it mentions is socioeconomic status, and that wanting to be accessible and to have housing for people across that spectrum. And I think that, I've thought a lot about this in the past few weeks especially. And even these meetings, it's interesting because I've heard a couple people say that there's a certain population that, why is it all one-sided? And one thing that kind of occurred to me is that I think the notices are published in the Keene Sentinel, and I don't know anyone who lives in an apartment who gets the Keene Sentinel, so that's why I'm the only apartment dweller here, it feels like a lot of times. But I think that, there you go, Rock. Well, how did you know about this? So I think it's worth considering that there are kind of a few sides to town, and I know it because when I go to the other side of town, I don't drive, so I don't get to West Keene very often. But nobody knows my name there. And here I walk down the street and, just running in, it takes me 2 hours to get home from Main Street because, you run into people and you have conversations. And so I can completely understand why property owners would be concerned and also may not necessarily have as much exposure to the problem that is existing and what, the shortage of housing and how that does affect the people living here and how that is the reason cited for the rising cost of apartments. And I've also heard a lot of people talk tonight about concerns about septic and water and I was here when they dug up the Washington and Court Street and then again Roxbury to replace that those pipes underground. And I think it was when they first started digging up that I learned that this was one of the first cities to have an underground sewage system and I thought that was fascinating. And so I guess I would say to that, I don't know exactly what the answer to that is, but I know that this has been traditionally a place that rises to the challenge and evolves. And, I understand that some people may not want the world to be as crowded right now. And I mean, right now it just is. So I don't, there physically people take up space. There's no, there's no way around it. And so there needs to be a place for them. And in this case, I think it needs to be a lot of different places because there are a lot of people who are struggling to find a place to go. There are, you know, the number of people I've known who are in abusive relationships and abusive homes because they can't find a place to move to. I mean, it's just kind of across the board. I'm all for it. But thank you.
Thank you, Laura. Anyone else? Yes, sir.
Matthew Hall, 430 on Hurricane Road. I wrote a letter. Should be in your packet. I'm not going to read it. Instead, I am concerned about the open space in a rural district. And looking at what is before us in 2022-09B, I see that the staff report says that the Conservation Residential Development Subdivision, CRD, is a subdivision in which at least 50% of the land is permanently conserved as open space, while the homes are located on the remaining portion of the site. And I see further that under Section 8 of the Relating to Amendments of Land Development Code, removal of Section 19.3.2.d, open space reserve subdivision, subsection 2 of Article 19, which states, quote, conservation residential development subdivisions in a rural zoning district that permanently reserves 60% of the existing tract area or greater as open space will be eligible for the density bonus, as noted in 19-2. I am wondering how that is affected or is informed by a publication from the New Hampshire DES titled Innovative Land Use Planning Techniques, a Handbook for Sustainable Development. Section 1.4, Conservation Subdivision. Given that conservation of open space is typically a primary objective of pursuing this approach, communities are encouraged to require that a minimum of 50% of buildable area of the parcel and 80% of the non-buildable area be conserved as part of the conservation subdivision. Now, are you proposing to protect 50% of the entire parcel, or are you proposing to protect 50% of the buildable area and 80% of the non-buildable area? I'd like to know.
My understanding is it's 50% of the whole parcel.
What if the parcel is 50% non-buildable or 60% non-buildable? How is that in line, is obviously not informed by the state's intentions? The second thing that I'm going to bring up, I'll keep it short, has to do what I will call churning of the market. And I was very glad to see that there were caps on the resale price of the homes in these rural districts, capped at 2 times the, right here, 2 times the resale value of the unit is not to be more than the original price plus 2 times the accumulated consumer index. If I was a builder and I have to build these units to be comparable to the non-workforce housing in size and condition, I'm going to be building to the high end of what's permissible. I don't think I could do it otherwise. Given that, you're starting at the high end of the threshold. And if it churns over a few years at twice the accumulated consumer price index, my suspicion is that you will outrun 80% of the HUD median area income for a family of 4 in Cheshire County. My prediction is that the median income is going to track more closely to that consumer price index, accumulated consumer price index, than it is to 2 times that. And so I'm concerned, how will that be handled? Will the homeowners be refused to sell it? How is that to be handled? I mean, it just projecting, I mean, it seems mathematically very possible, given what we're in. The population is not decreasing. Demand for homes will not decrease. I doubt that the prices are going to go down for any extended period of time. Thank you for your patience. Thank you for listening to me. Have a good night.
Thank you, Mr. Hall. Anyone else? Ma'am?
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Jody Riggio, and I am at 447 Hurricane Road. I am a native New Yorker. I moved here with my husband 3 years ago. We retired. My husband served our community there for 34 years. We look for the perfect place. We know of land. We had owned a 53-acre farm upstate New York. We wound up selling that and looked elsewhere to have close proximity to our children in New York and grandchildren. We came to Keene and completely fell in love with it. It took us 3 years to find our perfect home. Home with property, with views, and a habitat of animals. Building on this road would create more traffic. It does not have the infrastructure. There is hills and rocks and ledges. The attraction of moving to rural Keene and having the proximity of a city nearby. I could have bought a home in the city. I chose not to. Putting this CRD on this road would change the unique characteristic of Hurricane Road. I don't want to move, to be honest. My concern is habitat. Okay, we have pine trees and animals that we see constantly. There are bears, coyote, bobcats, etc. Our septic system, we maintain every single year. So my concern is what's going to happen to the other. The drainage on that road is not well. I have been told of mass flooding on that road, and this would also be a problem. There are many, many areas outside of the rural district that I have viewed that is buildable property. I am not saying that there isn't a need for housing. I am on the Keene Facebook page and see people constantly asking, do you have an apartment? Is there a house for sale? So there is a need for housing. But to bring it onto our road and change the unique characteristic of it, I don't think it's, I'm not for that. I am completely against that. I mean, that's really all I have to say. I mean, I'm just taking notes, and I'm kind of new to this, but I'm really concerned about what it will do to that particular road. It's not a wide road. The winter, the ice on that road is really bad. And, you know, you can get flooding. It's just, I don't think it's a good area. That's my opinion. And I truly believe that by changing it and adding 30 homes here, 30 homes here, 30 homes here, it's just going to create mass chaos. And that is my opinion, and I thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mrs. Riggio. Anyone else?
Good evening, everyone. My name is Cole Mills. I live at 68 Langley Road. I am a member of the community. I live in the rural district. And like everybody else here, I'm also a person of faith, or at least, if you're not of faith, I hope you're at least spiritual. So the reason I am talking about this is when I listened to what was presented by our city planner, what I listened to the MIP group, what I hear is aspirational. This would be great because of this and this. And it's heartbreaking, and they're nice stories, but they're not backed up by facts. And the only people that have provided the facts are the people who say, look, this is a bad idea. Nobody has refuted the facts that Mr. Lacey has put forth in terms of the build-out. Nobody has rebutted the facts about the impact to the communities. Common trend among the group was really Joni Mitchell's song, right? They paved paradise, put in a parking lot. You don't know what you have until it's gone. And so when I looked at the CRD, I said, my gosh, those are very pretty pictures, and they show a perfect world. They don't show what the reality of Keene is. And because of that, the CRD amendment would be considered, in my view, dangerous, not from just an environmental perspective, not just from a community perspective, not just from a tax perspective, but the reality is that nobody in a CRD is going to build $233,000 homes. And we can point to Schuyler. Schuyler homes sell between $400,000 and $500,000. That's a fact. You can look it up. A house at 15 Daniels Hill, special exception, built on 2 acres, that sold for just under $500,000. There were some other homes similarly done at $500,000. So you're basically putting in $500,000 homes. That's not workforce housing. So, you know, when I heard about rent and $1,200 being the number, and Councilor Greenwald said $1,200, and what does that include? And said, well, it's a 2-bedroom and it includes some utilities. What was left off were Keene taxes, which are 3.2%. So to be a landlord here, it's very, very difficult because of the cost of what it is to do business here. But when I look at just building a house in this community, if I look at a lot that's buildable, that's $40,000. Septic, because you're now allowing this to go to areas without septic, water, gas. Septic system's about $30,000. A well is $15,000. At $150 a square foot, that's $184,000 for a 1,200 square foot building. So I'm already at 265. You cannot build anything that's workforce housing. You can't build anything that would be considered affordable in the rural areas. I also looked at the way they designed the road, and it looked very nice, the winding trails and all that. But the reality is when you shorten road frontage, you now put density towards your existing roads. So if I've got 160 feet of frontage, today I can put one house because I need a minimum of 100. You go to 40, I can now put 4 houses right next to each other right on top of each other, because I can keep all the land behind it in some sort of shared use. Not only that, but if you give me the density allowance, you now allow me to go to 5 or 6 homes in a very small space. So now you've changed forever these very beautiful, very unique communities that are special to Keene. I took a look at some of the things that were brought up in terms of the rules and whatnot. And one of the things that was very cleverly left out was that when you talk about space that you're putting aside, that space could be land that couldn't already be developed. It could be your wetlands. It could be your hills. It could be, so basically you're taking and basically giving somebody land that could not ordinarily be built on an allowance to make that as part of their uninhabited or their natural 50%. Other things that I saw when I looked at this ordinance was that it basically doesn't put any real restrictions on anybody. And you're going to get people who are going to cherry pick the best areas to build. Not only that, but we talk about taxes, and one of the things that I think Ms. Bruner was a little deceptive on was she said, well, only a landowner can choose to subdivide or not, or go for a CRD. Here's the thing, if I've got 10 acres of land, and this was based on the PLD testimony of Dan Legnell, he can look at that land and go, if a CRD was put here, what would that land be worth? And jack up my taxes. The only thing that would save it would be current use. So if I've got a house on that property, even at 2 acres, he can now look at that land and say that's eligible for CRD treatment, and can price it accordingly for tax purposes. In terms of other tax costs, kids are expensive, and it's true. It's about $15,000 to put a kid into school. On a $233,000 house, you're talking maybe $3,200 of cost of taxpayer going to SAU 29. That means that the rest of that money, the about $12,000, has to come from other taxpayers in the community to pay for that kid to go to school. If there are 2 kids in the house, that now doubles to $30,000, and you're still getting the same amount of tax. So it is going to put a burden, not just on the need for water, sewer, leaf pickup, police, fire, but also on the school system as well, that has not been thought out properly about. And it's going to burden the taxpayers that are here. I mean, the other thing to look at too is Keene's population has gone down about 400 people between 2010 and 2020. Keene State College has gone from over 5,000 students to 3,400, which should free up a lot of the homes in the area around the college, which would be great starter homes, great opportunities for affordable housing, walkable, close to amenities, in some cases multifamily, so it allows that burden to be shared over a couple of households. Take a look at the projects that are in the pipeline. 310 Marlboro. Take a look at the one that's on Daniels Hill across from Langdon Place, which is served by city services. Take a look at the fact that we've got more housing in Keene than we've ever had before. You've got Colony Mill that's been converted. You've got some of the large homes that have been broken up. You've got Washington School is all apartments. So we've got more housing. We've got more more interest in areas where development makes sense. This is not something that needs to be done for us to continue to have responsible growth and to bring diversity and to line up with our environmental ability of being a green, clean city, walkable city, vibrant downtown. You know, I heard the story and it was heartbreaking on the homeless, and I get it. We have a homeless issue. Also, as a county, we get people that import, or other towns that import the homeless to this community that we also open our arms to. Yet, Keene State College just took down a perfectly good dorm. And so, you know, to put the blame and the burden on us because of housing or CRDs, it doesn't solve the issue. There are other ways to solve that issue, and the community is doing that with an expanded 100-night shelter, with other avenues that are being taken on by local residents and things like that. The CRD does not solve that problem. You know, another thing too is that you know, we're going to have a changing demographic. You know, as people get older, we're going to go on to apartments, we're going to go on to condos, we're going to go into Hillside Village, we're going to die, right? So those homes are going to naturally open up as the progression of the community. The other thing, too, that really kind of bothered me was they talk about the need for employment. I hired people in Keene between 2008 and 2017, and I offered them good wages. I offered them great national wages, competitive wages. And the reasons that I couldn't get people was location, amenities, and a mediocre school system. Those were the things that were cited to me. Now, I now hire people in Hooksett, New Hampshire, and I still get the location issue. I have the amenities, I certainly have the housing, I have all that, but I get location. A lot of people don't like the weather. A lot of people, you know, find that New Hampshire is remote to the bright lights in big city. If housing, you know, and the other thing too is I look at the housing market, and right now there's about 66 houses currently for sale on the MLS. Of that, about 27 of those homes are $300,000 or less. Now, I got chastised last time because, well, $300,000 isn't the right, so I went under $250,000. And there were 24 properties available under $250,000. There's plenty of property that's out there. There's plenty of opportunity out there for people that want a place to live that have the means to do it. The other piece that I would add is, you know, we talk about, you know, the need for employment, and the need for employment, if that was the case, Dartmouth-Hitchcock should be bursting with doctors and nurses if they wanted to come here. They're paid well, and you can certainly live very, very well in the community on a doctor's salary. They're not, they struggle to get doctors, and then they do get them, they turn over. Same with the professional, the nurses, that type of stuff. They come in and then they move on. So it's not about necessarily the cost of the community, because there are jobs here that can certainly pay for any house in this community. It's that there's a disconnect, and that CRD is not going to solve. And so while it's aspirational and it may feel good, it will cause a tremendous, tremendous amount of damage, because you will see communities change in ways that you couldn't even think of. So I ask you to please keep things the way they are. They really do work. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Mills. Anybody else? All right. Well, seeing none, I'm going to close the public hearing, but written public comments will be accepted until 1 p.m. next Tuesday, November 8th. Written comments must be signed and submitted to the city clerk by that date and time to be included in the record. And that brings us back to our regular agenda, and we have a confirmation. Number 1.
This evening, we are confirming the mayor's nomination of a Jennifer Sayer to serve on the Congregate Care and Social Services Licensing Board for a term that would expire December 31, 2023.
Councilor Powers for a motion. Councilor Bosley for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to confirm the nomination.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Bosley. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Counselor Lake?
Yes.
Counselor Remy?
Yes.
Counselor Johnson?
Yes.
Counselor Giacomo?
Yes.
Counselor Filio?
Yes.
Counselor Williams?
Yes.
Counselor Jones?
Yes.
Counselor Madison?
Yes.
Counselor Roberts?
Yes.
Counselor Omerod?
Yes.
Counselor Chadbourne?
Yes.
Counselor Workman?
Yes.
Counselor Greenwald?
Yes.
Counselor Bosley?
Yes.
Counselor Powers?
Yes.
And that's unanimous, which brings us to communications, number 1.
This and the second communication are relative to the subject of the public hearing we just closed, though both of the letters, but one from Gary Weinren and the other one from Matthew and Kathy Hall, speak to the concept of the accessory dwelling unit as needing to be promoted as a way to provide lower cost housing.
And we'll file both of those into the record as informational, and then we have another one, number 3.
This is a communication from Jen and Kai Daffendecker, and they are talking about the 5G, 4G small cell wireless facilities on the Middle Street, Summer Street, Carroll Street, West Street, and Ashbrook Road.
Thank you. That'll be filed into the record as informational as well, which brings us to committee reports, number 1.
Municipal Services Facility and Infrastructure Committee report. It is a presentation on the status of the dog park and the disc golf park. I understand there's going to be a clarification of the committee's recommendation here.
Yeah, Councilor Greenwald, do you have a motion to offer here?
Okay, everybody take a deep breath, wake up. It's a little warm in here, or at least for me. I move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second.
We have a motion from Councilor Greenwald, seconded by Councilor Filio. Councilor Greenwald.
So basically what I'm going to ask is that the presentation of the dog park and disc golf project at Wheelock Park be accepted as informational, but also acknowledge the fact that this is their kickoff for their fundraising efforts for this project and encourage you all to participate.
Great, thank you. Any discussion or comments? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor?
Can we get a second?
Opposed? It is unanimous. Thank you very much. Brings us to number 2.
Municipal Services Facility and Infrastructure Committee report relative to a tree removal at 64 Hastings Avenue. On a vote of 5-0, the Municipal Services Facility and Infrastructure Committee recommends granting Aaron Lipsky's request to remove the tree in front of 64 Hastings Avenues at Mr. Lipsky's expense.
I'm looking at Councilor Greenwald for a motion. Councilor Filio for a
Thank
second,
you, Your
please.
Honor. Move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second.
And we have a motion from Councilor Greenwald, seconded by Councilor Filio. Councilor Greenwald.
Thank you. Mr. Lipsky came to us with some photos. The current hazard situation, tree is blocking his line of sight on Hastings Avenue. We had discussion about what to do with this, and eventually came around that if he wants to pay to take the tree down, that would be okay with the committee. Personally, I like trees, but I also like public safety, so I hope that you will agree. If he wants to take it down, let him take it down.
Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? It's unanimous. Number 3.
We have an informational report from Municipal Services Facility and Infrastructure. It is regarding a update on the Findings property and the Keene Skate Park project.
And this will be filed into the record as informational. Number 4.
A Finance Organization and Personnel Committee informational report on updates from Spectrum Service.
And this will also be filed into the record as informational, but I would note that Spectrum will be attending the December 8th meeting of the FOP committee, so keep that on your calendar if you're interested in this issue. Number 5.
Finance Organization and Personnel Committee report relative to a Highway Safety Agency grant. On a vote of 5-0, the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee recommends the manager be authorized to do all things necessary to accept the grant from the New Hampshire Highway Safety Agency to fund the Highway Safety Grant for Keene.
Councilor Powers for a motion. Councilor Remy for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second. We have a motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Remy. Councilor Powers.
Thank you, Your Honor. Lieutenant Shane Maxfield joined us last week to introduce the current year funding for the Highway Safety Agency grants to the Keene Police Department. It's a total of $14,516, and it's split up to a number of programs that they work towards: bicycle safety, highway safety, DWI enforcement, and things of that nature. In the past, they used to pass it out individual grants, so you had to hear this 4 or 5 times. And quite frankly, it created an awful lot of paperwork that they finally, at the state level, brought down to one particular program and one grant. So it was unanimously approved by the Finance Committee, and I hope you'll do the same.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? That is unanimous. Number 6.
Finance Organization and Personnel Committee report relative to a Land and Water Conservation Fund grant. On a vote of 5-0, the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee recommends the manager be authorized to execute the submission of the application for the Land and Water Conservation Fund grant, Round 33, for the Russell Park renovation project and the skate park project.
Once again, I'm looking at Council Powers for motion. Council Remy for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second. We have a motion from Council Powers, seconded by Council Remy. Council Powers.
This action is to authorize the manager to apply for an additional funding source towards this project and the skate park project around the Russell Park restoration. We have received up to this date $400,000 in granting. Round 31 makes some more money available. The cost of doing business, as we know, we see this too frequently, has gone up. So applying for the grant will help us to be able to request $225,000 towards the entire project. In the skate park project, a lot of that money has been raised individually by the group, but this is all kind of weaving together as you begin to see the maps, and it might be in your package tonight, but there's a very nice display of how this is going to come together as the green weather comes around in the springtime. Finance approved it unanimously. I hope you do the same.
Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? That one is also unanimous. Number 7.
Finance Organization and Personnel Committee report relative to the holiday sponsorship program. On a 5-0 vote, the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee recommends the manager be authorized to do all things necessary to accept donations associated with the city's 2020 holiday sponsorship program.
Council Powers for a motion. Council Remy for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second. We have a motion from Council Powers, seconded by Council Remy. Council Powers.
Thank you, Your Honor. This is our annual event conducted by the city staff. It authorizes the city manager to receive the gifts that are given to the city to be used through the program, that they will give it back out to those in need. And there's various levels of contributions by different people, different organizations. But when it all comes together, there's about 280 individuals that benefit from these donations, with anywhere from a buck to some pretty nice gifts for youngsters that are really in need at this time of year. So committee unanimously approved this, and we hope you'll do the same.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? That one is unanimous. Number 8.
Finance Organization and Personnel Committee report about a authorization to accept a New Hampshire Housing Opportunity Planning Grant. On a vote of 5-0, the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee recommends the manager be authorized to do all things necessary to accept and expend grant funds in the amount of $91,150 from the Invest New Hampshire Municipal Planning and Zoning Grant Program for the purpose of hiring a consultant to develop regulations with the goal of increasing the supply of housing in the community.
Thank you very much. Council Powers for a motion. Council Remy for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second. We have a motion from Council Powers, seconded by Council Remy. Council Powers.
Thank you, Your Honor. This also is a project that's gone on through various iterations and various donations and grants to the city of Keene, working towards our project that has to do with the ability of us to supply housing in this community and a little bit in the area. So there's been some work done to survey. There's some ideas out there, but essentially this grant of $91,150 will allow the manager to be able to hire some professional assistants to help us come up with a concept that we'll be able to use in the near future to address the problem that we're facing. Finance Committee recommended or voted unanimously to approve. I hope you do the same.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? That is unanimous. Number 9.
Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee report relative to the amended Keene Community Power Plan. On a 5-0 vote, the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee recommends the approval of the Keene Community Power Plan as amended on July 31, 2022.
Council Powers for motion, Council Remy for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second. We have motion from Council Powers, seconded by Council Remy. Council Powers.
Thank you, Your Honor. We heard from the manager last week or the week before that our Keene Community Power Plan has been approved in Concord. It's been reviewed by a number of agencies, and it's beginning to move forward. But one of the things that was done by several agencies to look at our program was to add a couple of comments that make it just a much more solid plan, mostly about information and data security for the customers that may want to use this. So our city plan is going to be amended to add this language to make it compliant with what they're looking for there in Concord, and really make the customer who's using it a little more assured that things are the way they should be to protect them if they elect to use this program. Finance Committee voted unanimously to recommend that this be amended. We hope that the council will do the same.
Thank you very much. Any discussion? Yes, Councilor Jones.
So with the amendments, this will come back to us, correct? So we're approving the amendments without knowing what they are.
City Manager.
In your packet, the amendments were articulated, and they include the
No, I don't need those, I've seen those.
Oh,
I
okay.
thought you had others that.
Oh, no,
I thought the
no,
council
sorry.
was talking
Just,
about others.
just the ones that were included in the packet.
I'm very familiar with them.
Okay, great.
Any further discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? That is unanimous. Number 10.
Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee report relative to a change order 2 for a environmental services water monitoring at the closed municipal landfill. On a 5-0 vote, the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee recommends the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute change order number 2 with EnviroTrack Environmental Services for expanded landfill monitoring for an amount not to exceed $29,200 for a revised contract total of $68,152.
And I'm looking at Councilor Powers for motion. Councilor Remy for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second. We have motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Remy. Councilor Powers.
Thank you, Your Honor. This will authorize the manager to sign a change order to a contract that we currently have with EnviroTrack Environmental Services, independent testing agency that's looking at groundwater in the areas that are down gradient from the sanitary landfill that we formerly operated. There's been a set of standards that have been tested since we closed the landfill, and we were testing to the standard that was in existence at the time. That standard has changed a little bit with the issues of, if I got this right, PFAS, those types of things. So we need to change the way we do the testing. And of course, when you change something like that, your professionals need to do some changing and do some different monitoring. So that's the difference in the contract. $29,200 be added to the contract. That amount of money is within the current budget. Was unanimously passed by the FOP. I'd like the city council to do the same. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous. Number 11.
Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee report relative to a change order for the imprinted crosswalks downtown. On a 5-0 vote, the Finance, Organization, and Personnel Committee recommends the city manager be authorized to do all things necessary to negotiate and execute a change order with BDM for the repair of the downtown imprinted crosswalks in the amount of $9,957 for a revised contract of $56,779.
Thank you. Council Powers for motion. Councilor Remy for a second, please.
Thank you, Your Honor. Move to carry out the intent of the committee report.
Second. We have a motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Remy. Councilor Powers.
We were joined by Harry McKelvey from Public Works the other night. Explained that They began the project downtown to work on the crosswalks with a local contractor that's got a lot of experience at it and has done it for us in the past. There were supply chain issues that they faced and weren't able to finish the job in a timely fashion and waiting for parts. In the meantime, the areas that were not overly affected have now worn more over time, so got another part of that downtown part that needs to be addressed. And of course, it's more material, more time, and it's the addition of the $9,957. Supply and material is here, they're readily available, and it's gonna be warm for another week, so I think it'll be finished real quick if you pass this tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous. I understand there aren't any city manager comments tonight, so we'll move on. We've got one item for more time, and more time will be granted, which brings us to resolutions, number 1.
We have a memorandum from the Assistant City Manager, Human Resources Director, which introduces Resolution R 2022-34, a resolution in appreciation of Thaddeus J. Durandal III upon his retirement.
Thank you, and I understand Mr. Durandal has already migrated south after his retirement, so if Councilor Powers can fill in the motion with some color, or at least speak to this a little bit, that would be great.
I would move to adopt Resolution 2022-34.
Second.
And we have a motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Bosley. Councilor Powers.
Thank you, Your Honor. Actually, if he was here, he'd be much more colorful than I. But this guy's got a plan. I mean, he's worked for the city of Keene for 22 years. Prior to being a police officer here in the city of Keene, he was a police officer in 2 other communities in the county, and he served this country in the United States Army as an MP. He's a cop. He's organized. Packed, ready to go, turned in his equipment last week, and the next day, they moved. A great plan. Excellent employee. I'm sure many people have run into him on the street. Very active officer, a good supervisor, and a great employee, and it would have been nice if he could have come back and seen you all to say goodbye. I'll get his address and we'll visit down there. Please pass this. Thank you.
Oh, thank you so much. Any discussion? Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? And that is unanimous. Which brings us to number 2.
Our second item, which is a resolution, is dealing with the fiscal policies. And on a 5-0 vote, the Finance Organization and Personnel Committee recommends the adoption of Resolution R 2022-33 relating to the FY23 fiscal policies. And we have Resolution R 2022-33, a resolution relating to fiscal policies.
And I'm looking at Councilor Powers for a motion.
Thank you, Your Honor. I would move to adopt Resolution 2022-33.
Second. We have a motion from Councilor Powers, seconded by Councilor Remy. Councilor Powers.
And this has to do with our fiscal policies. You know, annually, we begin the process of the budget program for the city of Keene with following the fiscal policies. This year, the only real need to make any changes to this was to adopt a section under the capital funds area that specifically now spells out the sewer capital project fund and the water capital project fund. In the past, the funding software system really didn't allow it to have that deep of a drill down through a different accounts, but the new system's in and moving along, so this is an opportunity to add that to it. And as they go forward, they'll populate it, and it'll be obvious that when you look at the budgeting process, it's there. So the Finance Committee voted unanimously to pass this, and we hope you do the same.
Seeing none, are you ready for a vote? All those in favor? Opposed? That's unanimous. So that's the last item on our regular agenda. However, we do have some business that we need to handle in non-public. So I'm looking at Councilor Powers for a motion. Councilor Bosley for a second.
Thank you, Your Honor. I move to go into non-public session to discuss consideration of pending claims or litigation under RSA 91-A:3, Roman 2E.
Second.
We have a motion from Counselor Powers, seconded by Counselor Bosley. Is there any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Counselor Lake?
Yes.
Counselor Rennie?
Yes.
Counselor Johnson?
Yes.
Counselor Joshua?
Yes.
Counselor Elliott?
Yes.
Counselor Williams?
Yes.
Counselor Jones?
Yes.
Counselor Madison?
Yes.
Counselor Roberts?
Yes.
Counselor Override?
Yes.
Counselor Chang?
Yes.
Counselor Workman?
Yes.
Counselor
Yes.
Greenwald? Counselor Bosley?
Yes.
Counselor Powers?
Yes.
And that's unanimous. So if we'll give a minute to clear the room, we can shut the doors.
I could see my little note. I don't know why.
So that's an